this particular piece, a prayer to Lord Shiva in 8 verses, Ashtashambhu, set to Raga Malava Kaushika, Tala Tripata, a composition of late Guru Dr. Devaprasad Das.
Namaste and greetings from Indica Academy. It's a great privilege for us to have with us Odissi Maestro Rahul Acharya ji. Welcome to this conversation.
Thank you so much.
And for taking time. All of us had a wonderful, soulful experience yesterday at Gudiya Sambrama. And thank you for this conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So, we are a little confused whether to say Rahul Acharya ji or Acharya Rahul.
No, Rahul Acharya. Acharya is my surname. So.
And you come from a very family which is immersed in the worship of Lord Jagannath. Could you tell us about what this being part of the Rajguru family, what does it mean to you?
See, actually, I come from a family of the royal priests, the royal preceptors of the Jagannath temple. Actually, we have lost that tradition for almost my great-grandfather. My father's grandfather was a Rajguru, and he was a very great scholar. But then slowly, because it stays with the eldest in the family, so my father's uncle, my great-granduncle, my granduncle, in fact, he was the Rajguru. My grandfather did not maintain the tradition. So he opted out of the tradition because he thought it was too imposive on him. So my dad was a bureaucrat, my father was a bureaucrat. And because he belonged to this English education system, so he was more like, if you want to read a translation of the Vedas, you better read Max Muller. So this was something I detested. My mother is the first female engineer of Orissa. And she would always tell me that, see, you have something in the family that is basically what people read as history in textbooks. So you have the choice to either choose this or choose that. You have all the freedom, but I would still want you to know what your family is and go deep to the roots. So that was something that sparked my interest. And because we still have very strong ties with the temple, and my family is also based out of Puri, so I have had a first-hand experience of the rituals, though I do not do it myself because I live in Bhubaneswar. So I'm not based out of Puri. So if you're serving in the temple, so you have to be there 365 days a year, which is not possible for me because of the kind of work that I do. But it means a lot because, as you know, Jagannath is the citadel of Hindu orthodoxy, basically one of the Char Dhams, the 4 major centers of pilgrimage. And that is also the citadel of Orissan culture. So anything and everything you do about Orissa is focused around the Jagannath temple, subtracting its religious fervor. You strip the, Jagannath of Odissa's history, Odisha is left with no history. Besides the point, the entire history of Odisha lies enclosed within the presence of the Jagannath temple. Numerous dynasties have come, coronations have been held, invasions have happened, so everything is centered around Jagannath. So to belong to such a family is a great privilege and a blessing.
And I think you're a very worthy holder of that heritage.
We are all servants of the Lord.
So, you talk about, yesterday you were talking about a lot of temples in Orissa not being a hub of such activity. So we see Orissa and we associate it with this beautiful mandir, of course. But what about the other temples? And if we were to connect dance, which is your primary vocation, to temples, and if when you say that you're carrying forward this tradition, even in dance, how far back do we go, and which other temples are we talking about? Yes, we are talking about this temple, but is the source of music and dance also in other temples?
Yes. So this is a very interesting question, madam. So I'll take you back to the Lingaraj temple, which is in Bhubaneswar. Now, with the Ganga dynasty taking over the throne of Odisha, it is Utkala. Odisha was divided into two kingdoms. I mean, the ancient name was not Odisha, it was Odradesha. So there was the northern Orissa, which was Utkala, and the southern part, which was Kalinga. Now, the Ganga dynasties basically ruled in Kalinga. So, Choda Ganga or Chola Ganga. So, his mother was the daughter of Kulatunga Chola. So, he belonged to the Chola dynasty from the maternal side. And then, from his father's side, he belonged to the Eastern Ganga dynasty. When he shifted base to Cuttack, that is what the city is established by him, he developed the city. So they were basically Shaivas. So the center of activities was the Lingaraj temple, because before them it was the Bhaumakaras who ruled that part of Odisha. Now everything was centered around Lingaraja in northern Orissa, northern coastal Orissa. It is only after Chodaganga's invasion, I won't say exactly invasion, because that was he was a very suitable ruler or heir for the throne of Utkala. When he took over the throne, he converted to Vaishnavism under the influence of Ramanujacharya when Ramanujacharya visited Puri. When he converted to Vaishnavism under his influence, I mean, you know that these Cholas or Gangas were basically Shaivas, but they were patrons of Shaktism, Vaishnavism, everything. So there was a great deal of religious tolerance. But until Chodaganga came over to northern Utkala, northern Orissa, where he made Cuttack the center of his activities, until then, Lingaraja was the center of all the cultural activities. Now, after Chodaganga, when he started the reconstruction of the Jagannath temple, it was his great-grandson, Ananga Bhimadeva or Anyanka Bhimadeva, completed the reconstruction of the Jagannath temple in 1198 AD. He officially declared Jagannath to be the undisputed emperor of Orissa, and the kings under whom the administration of the Jagannath temple laid, they would only be the superintendents of Jagannath's army. So after this declaration that Jagannath is the Rashtra Devata of Odisha, the entire focus shifted to Puri. Now, as a result, all of these other temples, they started losing patronage. And within due course of time, they literally became dominant. Now, all these temples, say for instance, the Konark temple. Anyone outside Odisha knows about only 3 temples. It's either the Jagannath temple, which is the most famous one and superly active, like hyperactive. The other one is the Lingaraj temple, which is in Bhubaneswar. And the third one is in Konark, the Sun temple at Konark. So this forms the golden triangle. Orissan tourism's logo is, Orissa is India's best kept secret. It actually is a fact. Other than these 3 temples, there are numerous temples which are so-called under the Archaeological Survey of India, to such an extent that we as dancers are not allowed to photograph ourselves in full costume or have video shoot. We tell them we're basically promoting this defunct temple outside. They would not permit us. They would permit all sorts of nefarious photographs being taken there, but we are not permitted. What because Archaeological Survey of India says that when you are dancing, it makes sound, and it's it might prove it's a threat to the construction, and something might happen So that is what they say. That is some kind of an illogical reasoning they give. Yeah, absolutely. Now, when I talk about the dance style I perform, which is Odissi. Odissi was a dance form which was reconstructed post-independence. Now, the terminology was coined in 1953 by Kavichandra Kalicharan Patnaik, who was one of the revivalists and a great scholar of Orissa. So he coined the term Odissi. Now, the precursor to Odissi, we believe that Odissi was revived from the temple dance style of the Devadasis, which is the case for a lot of dance forms around India. So it was performed by the Devadasis, who were colloquially called the Maharis. Now, the first inscription of these Devadasis is actually found in the Brahmeshwara temple in Bhubaneswar. I do not deny the fact that the Mahari tradition came to the limelight as a practice in the Jagannath temple. But before the Jagannath temple actually became the crux of the cultural activities, the citadel of the culture of Odisha, the inscriptions were first found at the Brahmeshwara temple, which is a Shiva temple.
Right.
The second inscription was found at a temple called Shobhaneshwara, which is again a Shiva temple 22 kilometers from Bhubaneswar. So the major two inscriptions were found there. So it is to be accepted that the Mahari tradition did not start in the Jagannath temple, which has been told to us historically, but as a practice in the Shiva temples. And also historically speaking, for the Ganga dynasty, their patron deity was Madhukeshwara. This temple remains in a very dominant state at Mukhalingam, which is now in Telangana. So this Madhukeshwara temple is the place we have inscriptions found in the Jagannath temple, where Choda Ganga took the Gudisanis from the Gokarneshwara and Madhukeshwara temple to perform inside the Jagannath temple for the coronation ceremony of his son Kamarnavadeva, and these Gudisanis were later appointed to perform for Jagannath. So these Devadasis migrated from here there. Of course, there was a set of Devadasis who were practicing there. They had different groups. So a group was migrated, was basically taken from here to perform in Puri, and they stayed back. So these temples were agog with all these dance and music performances. We do not have any record of any Devadasi performances in courts.
Right.
Say for instance, you see in the court of Sarfoji Bhosle, you have these Sadirs who were performing, which is kind of the history of Bharatanatyam. We do not have any such record of any Devadasi performances happening in any of the king courts. So these Devadasis, if they performed in the court of the kings, they were not allowed to perform in the temples. So the temple
can we assume that if we don't have access to records, that it didn't happen? Or
no, there are some records are accessible.
Okay.
In fact, most of these records are accessible.
Okay.
Most
so
of these records
are records
yes,
that they did not perform in.
Yes, because we have the Karmangi, and we have the Karmangi, that is the rituals of the Jagannath temple, which talks about all the performances also of the musicians and the dancers, and what time of the day they would perform for Jagannath, or what festival which group is assigned to perform. So that is on record. That is on record.
So we already have a distinction between performing for the Lord, for Bhagwan, and a performance for, in a non-devotional place. So when did that get even more stark, and what have we lost because of that division?
See, I'll take you back to the times of the Natya Shastra. So when you talk about performing arts, the purpose of performing arts is rasanubhuti, the experience of that rasa. And the Taittiriya Upanishad says raso vaisaha, which was further elaborated by Vishwanatha Kaviraj in the Sahitya Darpana. He says, Brahmaswada Sahodara. The experience of rasa is only akin to the experience of the divine, the younger brother of experiencing the divine. So, irrespective of where you perform, you're performing for the Lord. You know, as the Kathopanishad states, I'm performing for the person who sits within me. Atmanam rathinam vidhi shariram rathamevatu. So that rathi who sits inside me, he needs to be moved. So, irrespective of where I am performing, see, our concept of rasanubhuti is not entertainment. It's beyond that. It's transformative. It's not like you watch a 3 hours movie, come and have a discussion and oh, this actor was good, that actor took off his shirts and was showing off his well-kept body and all of that. It's not that. So the idea of rasa is Brahmaswada. You know, that experience of how our acharyas, starting with, Abhinavagupta and his predecessors have defined, and it is a continuing process of how each one of us analyzes theory of rasa or aesthetics. So, whether you perform in the temple or you perform on stage, it is the same for every dancer. Because when you are doing that Bhumi Pranam and you're performing those ablutions to the Bhumi, you're consecrating the space and transforming it into a temple. So, you're basically carrying the audience away with you. You're transporting the audience away with you. So you're not dancing for the audience. You're dancing for yourself. So the audience gets carried away. So what has changed is this lack of in-depth knowledge and self-contemplation. I always tell my students, because it's something I incorporate in my life, see, dances for me is not about being famous or earning money. I have a very strong academic degree in, I am a postgraduate in genetics, in biotechnology. So I always had something to fall back upon. The purpose, I won't say I chose dance, but dance chose me, was because probably I was meant for a higher calling. So my dance is my journey of self-discovery. It's my journey of exploring myself. So it is my way of life. It is my sadhana. It's not about how many hours I put in for the practice or how many shows I do or what is the remuneration I charge. It's not confined to that. It's way beyond that. Yes, because it is our profession and we earn from it, so we have certain professional obligations. But apart from that, once you're on stage, you are a sadhaka. So what has changed is this lack of in-depth knowledge and self-contemplation. And thanks to the bane of social media, it's one show and you're like an internet. I never knew what an internet celebrity was. I didn't know what an Instagram celebrity was. At least my generation did not know. So this has become an in thing and it's too distracting. It's too distracting. People just don't have the time for that contemplation. So that is what is lacking. But now I am really happy that this generation is going back to the roots.
I also read in an article you wrote way back in 2001. I don't know how you had the maturity. You must have been very young when you wrote that. So the source you say of Odissi music is, one is the Devadasis, and then are the boy dancers you mentioned about them. So can you tell about boys and men in dance, and how is modern day Odissi dance? What does it get from that tradition? They were not allowed to dance in temples, if I'm right. And when you say that, wherever you dance, you're dancing for the divine, yes. But why do we have a structure then when somebody is allowed to dance in a temple and somebody else is not allowed to dance?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. Now, coming back to the history of Odissi, at a time when Gaudiya Vaishnavism took over, when I say Gaudiya Vaishnavism, I take you back to the times of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who migrated to Puri made Puri the centers of his spiritual activities. Puri became the center of his preaching activities. And their philosophy was Krishna as Purusha, the only Purusha, and everyone else is his Prakriti. So this whole concept of Akarshatiti Krishna, Karshatiti Krishna, Aradhayatiti Radha. So the force, the energy that worships that force of attraction has to be Prakriti. So that was a concept. I'll take you to a small incident in the life of Mirabai. When Mirabai visits Vrindavan, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, who was the head of the Vaishnava community and one of the foremost scholars of Gaudiya Vaishnavism and one of the 6 emissaries of Chaitanya's philosophy, Jiva Goswami, he was the head of the Vaishnava community. So when Mirabai visits Vrindavan, so she expresses a desire to meet Jiva Goswami because he is the head of the Vaishnava community. So Jiva Goswami refuses to meet Mirabai, saying, I am a celibate, I am a brahmachari, and I do not meet women. So Mirabai refuted, saying, she gave a very sarcastic comment. She said, I knew there was only one man in Vrindavan. I did not know there was a second one to challenge that man. So Jiva Goswami realized his mistake and came running to Mirabai. So this whole idea that Krishna is the only man and rest, everyone is his Prakriti, his creation, was the precursor of this Gotipur tradition, was the philosophy of the Gotipur tradition. Gotipur means single men, single boys. So in their tradition, they were these young pre-adolescent boys who would be dressed up as women and would perform, not exactly in the temples, in the mathas or the monasteries which were built to preach Chaitanya's philosophy. Now this started, of course it did not started during Chaitanya's times, it started in the approximately 17th century, because Chaitanya belonged to the later part of the 15th century, early part of the 16th century. So the followers in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, they tried to replace the Devadasi tradition in the Jagannath temple with the Gotipurs, because there was a tinge of patriarchy in their philosophy where they did not want women to come out in public. So they despised the performance of the Maharis in the Jagannath temple, and they were trying real hard to replace the Mahari tradition inside the temple and have these Gotipurs, rather substitute the Maharis with the Gotipurs. Fortunately or unfortunately, the tradition in the Jagannath temple is extremely Brahminized. Of course, it is all-embracing because there are a lot of tribal rituals, but there is a misnomer that it's a Vaishnava temple. It's not a Vaishnava temple, it's more of a Tantric temple. So Jagannath sits in the center, he is surrounded by the Ashtashaktis. So this is what the philosophy in the Jagannath temple, which was more of the Smarta tradition, they did not let this happen. So there was a stiff resistance by the priests. They were not allowed to perform inside the temple, but they performed for all the festivals that happened outside the temple. So they were not permitted entry into the temple. Now coming back to this whole gender identity of males and females dancers, I don't want to sound like a sexist here, but when I talk about the Natya Shastra, dance started with Shiva. So, in fact, in the 4th chapter of the Natya Shastra, which is the Tandava Lakshanam, when Bharata performs in front of Shiva, he showcases 2 of his productions. Upon Shiva's instructions, he shows the 2nd production, which is Tripura Daha. Then Shiva tells Bharata, what you've done is absolutely fantastic, you've done a wonderful job, but where is the soul of Natya? Because it's more like a Natya production. So where is the soul of Natya? And the soul of Natya is Nritta. There's no dance. So the soul of Natya is Nritta. Without Nritta, Natya is lifeless. So, I will teach you nritta. Mayapidam smritam nrittam sandhyakali nrityata nana karana samyogair angaharair vibhushitam. Now, I will teach you nritta, which I remembered. I had designed it with a lot of karanas and angaharas, and he instructs Tandu to teach Bharata nritta. Starting with Bharata, all of the acharyas have been men. Of course, what we treat as classical dance styles now, they're all these desi forms which were revived post-independence, and this was a tradition which was kept alive by the Devadasis. We definitely are indebted to them to have kept up this practice alive in the temples, but dance definitely started with men. You name all these acharyas, when you talk about the Uddhata Prayoga, the Sukumara Prayoga, which is the female version, started as a control to minimize the rigor of the Uddhata Prayoga. So, when Parvati dances, she dances to calm down Shiva's energy. So, even then, I mean, see, when Bharata was performing and Brahma asks Bharata to include the Kaishiki Vritti, to include Shringara Rasa in his productions, then Bharata says, Lord, I just have 100 sons, my disciples. Now, without women characters, I will not be able to bring in Shringara, because all of these are men. So then Brahma creates the 23 Apsaras, Sukeshi, Manjukeshi, Vidagdha, and so on and so forth, the 23 Apsaras who were included in Bharata's productions. So his Kaishiki Vritti comes later. So, not because I'm a male dancer, but dance definitely started with men.
Definitely. And you talk about when we talk about the grammar of dance, we talk about the physicality of dance. What can be done and what cannot be done by some person. It need not just be gender, but some people can do more than other people. So, do we have texts where there are different instructions for genders or in terms of capacity? When we say like largely men, we talk of Natya Shastra as being common to all of us. Like for instance, in the Veda, we say, women should not chant. We're not taking a stance, but we're just saying it is usually said. Certain things are for men, certain things are for women. We have to accept that. So, in the dance literature, in the dance Shastra, anywhere do we have separate instructions?
Yes, of course, because see, what started as Tandava today is associated with Shiva's dance, and when you talk about Tandava, people think you jump around on this stage, you're like hurling yourself, throwing yourself all over the place, so you're doing Tandava. That was not what Tandava was initially in the Natya Shastra. Tandava in the Natya Shastra comes from the word Tandu, because Bharata learned from Tandu, and according to Abhinava Gupta's commentary on the Natya Shastra, which is Abhinava Bharati, he says Tandu was the other name of Nandi, who is the actual author of the Natya Shastra, and he was the first witness to Shiva's dance, because he was the one who used to play the mridanga when Shiva danced. I mean, if I take you back to the invocation of the Maheshwara Sutras. So it was Nandi who was the first witness to Shiva's dance. So according to Abhinava Gupta, the other name of Nandi is Tandu. Because Bharata learned Nritta from Tandu, as a mark of respect to his guru, he named it Tandava. But in due course of time, by the time we reach, for instance, the Sangita Ratnakara, in the 13th century, I take you straight down in the line of Abhinava Gupta. The author of Sangita Ratnakara, that is Sarangadeva, he was a descendant of Abhinava Gupta, of course, because Abhinava Gupta is 10th century, whereas Sarangadeva is 13th century. But he came in the line of Abhinava Gupta, who had migrated to Aurangabad. So Sarangadeva, by the time we reach Sangita Ratnakara, there's a clear demarcation of the female dance and the male dance. So when you talk about Tandava, it becomes masculine. When you talk about Lasya, it becomes feminine. Of course, when you talk about very rigorous karanas, see, if you talk about the 108 karanas of the Natya Shastra, now, no text directly says that this has to be performed by men only and this has to be performed by women only, because dance is genderless. But being a student of life sciences, there are certain issues attached with post-pregnancy. Once you come to that stage, there are a lot of physical changes that happen. Men do not undergo that transformation, physical transformation. So amongst the 108 karanas, there are certain karanas, 8 karanas, which are supposed to be very acrobatic, which are in fact very acrobatic in nature. Certain point of time, it is advisable not to go through that trigger once your body is not ready. So now we use our own scientific analysis to tell you which is okay for you, which is not okay for you, because of a lot of physical changes men and women have. And subtly these texts do tell us this is for men, this is for women. They do tell us, but they're not like, they do not give you these divisions, these demarcations in black and white. Okay, this is only for men, this is only for women. It's not there. But there are certain stanakas, say for instance, in the Natya Shastra, which are meant for women. But if you go through all these sculptures in the various temples, you see the 108 karanas being performed by Parvati. So that restriction was not there.
She's Parvati.
Yeah.
So, but you're also somebody who does yoga and is trained in yoga. So while you dismiss saying, the other dances are, we look at the figure and the, of the physicality of the performance. But it's also something that one notices about your dance. I mean, for the audience, it's on first look, that is what is attractive. And it's not just the physical body, but it's an ability to do things so easily without effort. So what is yoga? How did yoga come into your life, and what role does yoga play in your dance?
See, what you would call as yoga is what I call as vyayama, or just exercise. You're only focusing on one aspect, that is asanas. But then we're forgetting this entire ashtanga, the 8 limbs of yoga. So I emphasize more on the yama niyama.
Right.
Yama niyama is must, so that regularity has to be there. If you're training in calisthenics, for instance, or you may be working out, you're doing cross training. So if you're fit, so your body will go through that rigor for sure. But how will you get that calmness from within? So that has to be there. So this is a diligent process of, it's not only the physicality, so it's also like the practice within, the internalization of what you're doing. So where your body is moving in whichever manner you want to, but there is an inner calm. Your body looks very agitated, whereas your inside is very calm. So dance for me is meditative. That is where yoga has taken me.
And you've also set up an institute for Sanskritam. Have you?
I do not have an institute for Sanskrit, but with my students, they are in fact, they're trained in the language. I focus on the language to study or to decipher the texts directly without having to depend on any commentary. So I always encourage my students to at least have a running basic knowledge of Sanskrit, so that they're able to decipher the texts themselves without having to depend on commentaries. Not exactly commentaries, having to depend on translations, because we all know, some of us who know the language, we all know that 99% is lost in translation. That is precisely why, say for instance, the Vrishakapi Sukta of the Rig Veda does not have a translation, because it is too erotic to the English world. So, and they have all these morals and, social norms, and, they're governed by the Christian values. And we are not. We are the land of Kama Sutra, we are the land of Chaura Panchashika, we are the land of Amaru Shatakam. So we are very exposed. And that is what our Shastras say. You walk into a temple, you see all these Kamakala murtis. So it is all there. So we're not as restricted, but there's this whole this moral values that has been thumbed on us comes from the Western world.
So when you perform outside India, Do you change your dance in any way? Like if we were to accommodate their sensibilities, not that we are doing something really, you know, outrageous or anything, but does it change? Does the music change? How do they connect to this art?
To be very honest, I might sound blunt. I don't want to, there's a very thin line being very straightforward and being arrogant. I don't want to sound arrogant. I am very non-accommodative. So I wouldn't want to tailor anything for anyone. This is my tradition. So you've come to watch me. So see me through my lens, not through your own lens. So when I am performing abroad, I am carrying on my shoulders the traditions of India, and I'll keep them, I'll place it in front of you the way it is.
But do you think, Rahulji, that in India itself, do art and artists occupy a space which they did in the past? I mean, there are incidents that have happened to you, and there are incidents that come out where artists or, you know, are not treated well in society. So what do we do to, it's not just, you know, we want the art, but we don't want the fussy artist because he's temperamental, he's moody, he'll have demands, he will want to be picked up from airport. We don't want that. We want his art because that's, we can relate.
Right.
So how do we stop this, you know, this thing and...
Well, politically speaking, we as artists come at the end of the list. So we are supposed to be the minimalistic contributors to the society, which things are changing, So, I mean, if you talk about, say, for instance, Bollywood is also art. I mean, it's a different kind of art. You might call it commercial art, but that also is art.
Yeah.
When they have, you know, this kind of a celebrity status, why do not classical artists have the same? You know, why don't we have too many buyers for classical dances? Why does a classical dancer have to compromise on a Bollywood show? You know, so now the thing is that, yes, I think this fussiness is very individualistic. You know, so organizers, I'm not targeting anyone here. I don't mean to any specific organizer, but yes, we as artists, or I think we as individuals, all of us have our own moods. We all are temperamental in some way or the other. Now, if you talk about snobbishness, if you talk about snobs, do you think any classical dancer would be a higher snob than a Bollywood celebrity? No. I don't think so. So if the organizers can go that extent to accommodate a Bollywood artist, Bollywood star, I think they're doing not even half of it when they have to do the same for a classical musician or a classical dancer. I would speak for my community.
For sure.
So I think this snobbishness or this temperamental mood is individualistic. I don't consider myself somebody who is in any way superior to anyone walking on the road, because that is my personal sadhana. I don't think because I'm a classical dancer, yes, and I'm an established dancer, I have an edge over the other people. So I am an individual. So I can take care of myself. So the artist is never greater than the art. So we are all, you know, none of us are indispensable. We'll fade away, the art will remain. You know, so the art is always higher than the artist. So that's how I look at it. So we'll just fade away, you know, I mean, this body will perish at a certain point of time. Yes, now I'm young, I'm in my 40s, I have that trigger, I have that energy, and I'm giving it my full shot. Maybe 10 years, 20 years later, I will not be able to give this kind of a rigor, but the art will remain. So I, as an artist, have to surrender myself with all humility to the art. You have my body, I prepare my body for you, take me and come out in your full form through me. So I'm just your instrument.
So one last question to this. What is your most memorable place where you have danced? Have you danced at Jagannath Puri? And if yes, what are your memories? If not, what would it mean to you?
As an acharya, will not be permitted to perform in Puri, and definitely as a man, not inside the Jagannath temple. And anyway, no one is allowed to perform inside the Jagannath temple anymore. There's no Devadasi left. But I mean, the temple administration is trying to revive the musical performances, and they have someone who's doing it. But it's just like to keep up a tradition, and they're being given very little remuneration for what they're doing. So it's not like in a big way the temple administration, which is under the government of Odisha, is doing a great deal to revive the performing arts inside the Jagannath temple. So memorable moment. There's a very beautiful story that I have been, that I've grown up with, which says that the princess of Saraikela, which is the birthplace of Chau in Jharkhand now, which is a part of Orissa, she was a very adept dancer, and she had this desire to perform for Krishna in Vrindavan. She waited for a long time, and she receives a call to perform in Vrindavan. So, and so she's invited to perform in front of Bihari ji at Banke Bihari temple. So she's performing there, and she makes a mistake. So then she, kind of comes to terms with herself. She's like, okay, these are sadhus, a lot of these, the only sadhus sitting here. What do they know about the technicalities of dance? So they wouldn't be able to make out the mistake. So, and she just turns back and she sees the deity of Banke Bihari winking at her. So she thought she's probably hallucinating. She's like, how can that happen? It's a deity made out of stone. So it doesn't have life. It's of course, it does have a rastha, but it's not alive per se. So it's only alive, it's living only for the people who realize that. But for an ordinary person, it's just a piece of stone carved into this deity of Krishna. So she's like, oh, she comes to terms with it, and she starts performing. She reconciles and she starts performing again. The second time she makes a mistake. This time she purposefully turns back and actually sees the deity of Bihariji winking at her. So after she completes her performance, I mean, people give her their respect and say, what a wonderful performer you are, is that. And the organizers come, and they ask her, what would you like to have? Like, this is your remuneration. She says, I want nothing. I just want a painting of Bihariji. So, and she takes this painting of Bihariji back home. She shuts all her communication with the outside world. So she says, since you winked at me, that means you're an expert dancer. You know where I made the mistake. I want to see you dance. And my auntie would always tell me, she was taught to dance by Krishna himself, and that is where she merged in him, like a modern day Mirabai kind of a thing. So that is something I've always looked up to. So the day I experience that thing, where it is like completely transformative, so it's not a place I would like to come back from. So that would be definitely memorable.
Yeah, that's a lovely note to end on. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
very
for
much.
this, such a beautiful
Thank you
conversation.
very much.
Thank you.